I'm not guilty. Does that include the time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old?
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for terrifying serial killers who were eventually caught and faced justice.
For news photographer Dino Castro, who will never forget what he saw through his viewfinder.
Joseph James DeAngelo. For years, two criminals, a serial assaulter and the original Night Stalker, left people in a state of fear in California.
I have very vivid memories of what he did to this community.
Each night, they patrol the neighborhoods of Sacramento County's east side.
You have people who are scared. This is a community where they wouldn't lock their doors.
Both criminals sent mocking communications to victims and the police. But by 2001, using DNA technology, it was discovered these two assailants were the same person, and the Golden State Killer moniker was soon created.
All the witnesses, all the original investigators, everybody's going to start passing away. It's now or never.
In 2018, former police officer Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested after genetic genealogy tracked the killer's DNA through a family tree to him. Beginning his horrific spree in 1974 and ending in 1986, DeAngelo is believed to have committed at least 120 burglaries, 51 assaults, and 13 murders. In 2020, he pleaded guilty to several charges and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
In June 2020, DeAngelo cut a deal, appearing in court to plead guilty to 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping with robbery.
Eric Edgar Cook. Between 1958 and 1963, people in Perth, Australia were incredibly worried. On top of a host of robberies, 8 people were murdered with a variety of methods.
A killer is at large, stalking at night in the suburban streets of Perth, killing people at random.
However, authorities believed 2 of these slayings were solved, with 2 people sentenced for the crimes. Yet they were innocent, and in 1963, a rifle linked to some of the killings was discovered in a bush. The police replaced it with a broken one and waited, watching for the owner to return. Eventually, Eric Edgar Cook arrived and was arrested.
As he reaches down and grabs the rifle, the detectives move in.
Place!
Nicknamed the Night Caller, he confessed to the 8 murders and 14 other attempts. After failing with an insanity plea, Cook was found guilty of his spree and was executed in 1964.
At precisely 8 a.m. on October the 26th, 1964, the trapdoor snaps open and one of Australia's most prolific serial killers drops to his death.
John Wayne Gacy. In 1978, teenager Robert Peast's disappearance was reported to the police by his family.
So he had told an employee and actually his mother that he was going to go talk to a contractor about a job. And he then went out the back door and he wasn't seen any time thereafter.
Rob Peace seemed to have just vanished off the face of the earth.
This led the police to investigate the home of John Wayne Gacy in the neighborhood of Norwood Park, Chicago, Illinois. After surveilling Gacy and searching his house several times, they found human remains in a crawl space.
When they executed that search warrant, they went in the crawl space, and the very first shovel that they dug, they found human remains.
Gacy, who famously worked as a contractor and as a clown at parties, confessed to taking the lives of around 30 men. He had lured people to his home before attacking them. In 1980, the Killer Clown, as he was nicknamed, was sentenced to capital punishment after being found guilty of 33 murder charges. And in 1994, the sentence was carried out.
On the 10th of May 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection at Stateville Penitentiary in Illinois.
Lucy Letby. Between 2015 and 2016, something strange was going on at the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital in Chester, England. Babies were becoming suddenly extremely ill, and occasionally they didn't recover.
By now, there had been 13 unexplained deaths. In September, the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health urged the Trust to investigate each death individually. That didn't happen.
On investigation, the demises of the patients were discovered to not be natural. Someone was causing it. And suspicion fell onto nurse Lucy Letby, who was involved in their care or seen nearby when things went wrong. After she was removed from her position, the incident stopped, and after much unconscionable delay, in 2018, Letby was arrested.
When she was arrested in July 2018, Lucy Letby was still working at the trust. No disciplinary action had been taken against her.
In 2023, she was found guilty of causing the demise of 7 patients and 7 charges of attempted murder. She was given the strictest sentence in England, with life imprisonment with a whole life order.
Lucy Letby, on each of the 7 offences of murder and the 7 offences of attempted murder, I sentence you to imprisonment for life.
Richard Ramirez. In 1984, a spate of terrible crimes began in Southern California. An intruder broke into homes and often toyed with people before slaying them.
A trail of murder and brutality left by the Night Stalker, one of the most ferocious serial killers in the annals of crime history.
The criminal was famously handed the moniker of the Night Stalker, not to be confused with the aforementioned original Night Stalker. In 1985, the police discovered a fingerprint belonging to Richard Ramirez in an abandoned car used in a crime.
That was exhilarating to know that a vehicle had been found and he had slipped up and left a fingerprint impression. And that's what ultimately led to an identification on him.
The hunt was on to find him, and eventually he was apprehended. In 1989, Ramirez was convicted of a huge 43 charges, including 13 murders and 5 attempts, and received 19 death penalties. Justice was served in court, but in 2013, Ramirez passed away from natural causes.
Dead at 53 of liver failure, Ramirez is remembered for his own description of himself at sentencing as a servant of Lucifer.
I will be avenged. Lucifer dwells within us all.
Dennis Rader. Between 1974 and 1991, a serial killer targeted people in Wichita and Park City, Kansas.
When BTK came forward, everybody's life changed. He would see a woman walking and he would say, "She's next."
Calling himself BTK after his MO, the criminal would send letters to the media and police detailing his horrid crimes. But then he vanished. By 2004, he began taunting the media again and even planned to restart his fatal attacks. The police tricked the murderer into sending a floppy disk, assuming he couldn't be traced.
And there's the file on there, testa.rtf, which was a Microsoft Office, or it's a Word document file.
And then you see Dennis, and then more gibberish, and you see Christ Lutheran Church.
But he was. This led them to the Christ Lutheran Church and to Dennis Rader. After a DNA test, they found BTK. In 2005, after changing his plea to guilty and detailing his crimes, Rader was sentenced to a minimum of 175 years in jail after taking the lives of 10 people.
Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences with a minimum term of 175 years. He remains in solitary confinement, where he will stay for the rest of his life.
Dennis Nilsen. In 1983, plumbers arrived at a property in London, England due to blocked pipes after complaints from several tenants. The worker found a strange substance inside, which turned out to be human remains.
One of the biggest murder investigations ever is now underway in London after the discovery of the remains of 3 men's bodies.
It was horrific. It made the hair in the back of my neck stand up.
The cause was traced to the residence of Scottish-born Dennis Nilsen, an Army veteran and former police officer. After the cops arrived, Nilsen disclosed he had further remains in the flat and confessed to slaying around 15 people since 1978.
And I sat in the back with Nilsen. I said, "Are we talking about 1 body or 2? And he just turned around and looked at me and he said, 15 or 16.
Later nicknamed the Muswell Hill murderer due to committing his crimes in the London district, in 1984, Nilsen was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years for 6 murders and 2 attempts. This was later changed to a whole life tariff.
He knew perfectly well he would be found guilty, and he knew he deserved it. He knew he should be.
Nilsen passed away in 2018. Samuel Little. Falling into crime as a teenager, Samuel Little spent a lot of time in jail for various incidents, including assault, kidnapping, and robbery all over the U.S.
In his younger years, Little was repeatedly arrested for burglaries and even assault. However, it was in 1970 when things really change.
In 2012, after having his DNA taken for a drug charge, he was discovered to have been a match in 3 murder cases. In 2014, Little was found guilty and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
Through serial killer Samuel Little's confessions, law enforcement and prosecutors from different states were able to solve dozens of cold case investigations, and Little was finally convicted and sentenced to multiple life terms of imprisonment for several murders.
Then in 2018, he confessed to many, many more slayings. From the 1970s to 2005, Little stated that he took the lives of 93 people, 60 of which have been confirmed so far.
I wish the hell I didn't, but it can't be turned back. Not only hurts, but more that I'm regretful for it. I'm constantly saying I'm sorry.
As such, this would make Little the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. Ted Bundy. Charming and good-looking on the surface, Ted Bundy seemed like a nice fellow, but in reality, he was a monster.
I never wanted to think people were born evil, but my opinion about that changed when I met Ted. I think he was just born evil.
Bundy would use his charisma or pretend to be injured to lure women to secluded areas before kidnapping them and later taking their lives. Even when Bundy was captured, on 2 occasions, he managed to escape and continue his terrible crimes.
The guard went outside for a smoke. The windows were open and the fresh air was blowing through and the sky was blue. And I said, I'm ready to go, and I walked to the window and jumped out.
But eventually, he was caught in 1978 in Florida. Bundy famously ignored his lawyers and represented himself in court. Yet, his plan didn't work, and he was sentenced to death multiple times for 3 murders and 3 attempts. Bundy later confessed to 30 killings. So far, 20 have been confirmed. In 1989, capital punishment was enacted on Bundy.
So it ended for Ted Bundy. 10 years, 28 confessions, millions in Florida's legal battle to end his life.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Jeffrey Dahmer. In 1991, a partially handcuffed Tracy Edwards got the attention of police officers in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
The officers were stopped by an individual who claimed he was in the apartment and became engaged in a dispute with the owner of the apartment and left the apartment and called the officers.
He told them he had been held captive and was threatened by someone who had offered him money to model for him. The cops followed Edwards to the apartment, where they found Jeffrey Dahmer within. As the officers investigated, they discovered photographic evidence of horrific crimes and even human remains stashed.
Police officers immediately arrested Dahmer after finding the remains of some of his victims in his apartment.
Dahmer was quickly arrested and confessed to a litany of crimes as further grim evidence was found. In 1992, the Milwaukee Monster received 16 life imprisonment sentences for taking the lives of 16 people in Wisconsin and Ohio. Then, in 1994, Dahmer and convicted killer Jesse Anderson were fatally attacked by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver.
There were a number of people who felt that Jeffrey Dahmer got exactly what he deserved. When I called his mother, she said, well, now everybody got what they want. The monster is dead.
Which killer was the most heinous? Let us know in the comments.
Maybe I haven't done enough. I might be ashamed of that, for not doing enough.
Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.